went to Brazil and played some cards with him. I made sure I lost. This will sometimes make a foolish man trust you. Then, when we talked about his troubles with the old sheriff, and I was allowed to show how I had reason to hate Pat Garrett too, I told him real quiet that if he'd kill Pat, I'd pay him for it. And I'd pay some witnesses to lie and say it was self-defense. Brazil said he knew a notorious killer named Jim Miller who might do it. I said I'd pay him, or Miller, whoever did it, and I'd bribe up some witnesses just to Wayne Brazil agreed. I kept watch on the road betwixt Brazil's land and Pat's. From up in the hills I had a spyglass and everything. It was cold up there at my little camp in the boulders, just 50 yards over the road. Hell, it was February. But I didn't feel the cold so much. Maybe if you've been dead, you're too well acquainted with the cold to be offended by it. The wind was singing a song and nipping my ears when 2 days later I spotted Jesse Brazil on the red dirt road down below, riding along one way with his friend Pat Rode, and then came across Pat riding along in a buggy on the other way off to town. Pat was riding with a man named Adamson. Brazil stopped him and they argued, probably about those goats eating up all the grass Pat wanted for his quarter horses. I watched close, grinning to myself. That spyglass pressed real hard in my eye. I saw it all. I saw Pat Garrett get out of the buggy to relieve himself, pissing off the trail, steam rising up from the puddle. He was still talking, real loud and sharp. The whole time he was peeing. I could make out a word or two about property lines. Pat was half turned away, and Brazil and Rode saw their chance. Brazil nudged Print Rode, who stepped up to Pat, pulled a pistol, and shot him in the head. Pat fell dead midstream, wetting himself on the trail. I was sorry I couldn't be there for him to see who had done it to him, but I felt the satisfaction all the same. Better than a good meal after a hard ride. I had finished Pat Garrett and got it done safely. Later, with me spreading around the gold, it was fixed up that it was self-defense, that Pat was going to go for the shotgun in his buggy. A fine line it was, too, and it protected me from being found out. And no one knew Billy the Kid was still alive, and that he had worked it to have Pat Garrett killed for killing Billy the Kid. But that feeling of satisfaction dried up quick as a water hole in the August sun. A few days later, I watched from afar as pallbearers put Pat in the ground, and soon they were gone from Boot Hill, and a colored fellow with a shovel had finished and gone home. I went down to the cemetery. I was all charged up with a thunderbolt and dug Pat right up. I pried open the coffin, hunkered down, and put my hand on his chest and shot the thunderbolt right into him. It made his eyes snap open so the coins flew off. His eyes kind of swiveled about in their sockets. He almost seemed to see me. Of course, his brains was shot through and he was decayed some, but there was a spark hanging around him, and I felt like he knew me for a moment. "I just wanted to say howdy to you, Pat," I told him, "wondering if you're enjoying your new digs. I put you here myself, Pat. It was me. I sure hope you can hear me." His mouth opened a little and a worm crawled out, and I could see the worm was glowing from the thunderbolts. Pat made a rattling sound like it was trying to talk, and his eyes looked in two different directions. One of those eyes was smoking, and it sizzled away into nothing. I tried to jolt him awake again, but he was gone. Still, that's what I call shaking the last drop from a bottle. I filled the grave hoping he would feel it, and made my way home from there, back to the buckboard, feeling more revenged. The bribes I paid the witnesses cost me half my gold. I went back to the mine and checked on Doc Victor. He was the same as before, half dead, half asleep, all wrapped up on the ice. I tottered him out, and a load of ice, and then I sealed the mine behind us, blowing up the entrance. Traveling by night, I took old Doc Vic and the thunderbolt canker and the buckboard cooled with ice. I was set on seeing California. I had time. Time's mostly all I have since, bub. I found a spot to rest myself in the Mojave out in the bush, and mostly I've been out there since. I put Doc Vic down in another old mine close by my cabin. By day I do odd jobs. Sometimes I crank up my machine. I keep it in repair, and I find other ways to get a charge. Which reminds me, this is the end of Billy's recording, but I'll tell you what happens next. It's getting dark as the tape runs out. Billy clears his throat, spits, drinks some tequila, and then suddenly up and limps toward my truck on the other side of the trailer. After I follow him, wondering what he's up to, he doesn't even ask my permission, singing Buffalo Gals to himself. He lifts the hood of the truck. Propping the hood, he turns to me and says, "I expect you to think all this I told you was the biggest goddamn lie you ever heard. And maybe my hand was sewn up at the wrist by a regular surgeon. Well, have a look at this." Then he takes off the red bandana and turns his back to the truck. That's when I can see a copper wire sticking out of the back of his neck, at the top of his spine. It's a bit blackened and slightly melty, but solid enough. He takes a coil of wire from his pocket, twists it onto that piece of metal sticking out of his neck, and fixes the other end on the truck battery. He fiddles with it, and then crack! There's a spurt of electricity. I jump back, startled. I smell the ozone and burnt flesh, and I see him go rigid, grinning real horribly, standing there shaking like a preacher with his own pants down. Then it stops. The battery's drained. He's panting. He jerks the wire loose and shakes himself, shivering and grinning. He coils up the extra wire, his eyes real bright. A wisp of smoke rises up from the back of his neck. It's getting darker out there by the second. But I can see him clearly, because there's some shine coming off of him. His buck teeth are glowing and the whites of his eyes are sparkling with energy. "I come a ways from my thunderbolt canker," he says, his voice rough and strong. "I needed that jolt." I don't like the way he's looking at me. He goes on, "I'm thinking about your voice machine. That's the one that's got me worried. I put my story on there. I come here because I need money. But there won't be any money, not real soon, ain't that right?" "It could take a while, yeah. Maybe I can sell this story of yours, or..." No, you can't do that. I changed my mind on it. When I ponder it, why, it's not safe for me. It's not what it was in my dream. I'll find some other way to get the money I need. I got to buy supplies to help Doc. He's coming back to life, but he's still mighty weak. That recording thing won't be of any help anytime soon." He paused, rubbed his thumb and forefinger together thoughtfully, watching the sparks that cracked between them. "Whomsoever, it's good I set it down. For my story's told on there, and that's enough. Maybe I'll give it to folks, but not yet. Anyhow, bub, I'm going to take that roll of talk with me." "The hell you are," I say sharply. "That tape belongs to me." He's still got that charged up buck-toothed wolf grin on him. It's making me sick to look at it. He steps toward me. "I was afraid I'd have to kill you. And here we is." Billy reaches out his hand toward my neck. Electricity crackles blue and yellow between his fingers. But the Corriganville security guard Carlos is coming along behind the buildings now, below us, flashlight in his hand. "Carlos," I yell, backing away from Billy. "Need help up here. Intruder's trying to rob me."